I think it's important to make sure that students can read and that students are literate, because that's how they're going to encounter information later in life. What we teach in school is a finite amount of information and finite number of resources, but if we teach them how to read and how to process and understand new information, they're going to be successful in whatever they tackle.
5 years ago, a case study was going around from one of the teachers that was in our school, and it was talking about creating a culture of reading. And they proposed that every single teacher, regardless of what subject they taught, would have a 20-minute block of time where they were reading with their students every day. I jumped on board. I did what I was told, good soldier, and I learned to love reading, and I never did before.
I enjoy reading books of my choice because they allow an opportunity for the reader to build a world apart from that could actually exist and absorb themselves in their imagination of it, and that lets them gain from it and comprehend what they're reading because they're interested in the topic.
It helps me to grow and makes me be able to read more because I don't have to worry about reading something that's going to be dull.
I like reading in class because it gets me more interested in what we're learning.
And when I can do things that I'm interested in and I like to do, it makes it feel like, I've got a little bit more freedom with what I can do, and I can find more topics that I'm interested in instead of just being assigned something.
Because when you're made to read a certain genre or whatever, it kind of ruins the fun of reading.
A lot of teachers, they force you to read certain books, and then you get extremely bored of them, and and you don't enjoy reading as much, but having Miss Taylor allow me to read the books that I like to, I really enjoy reading in class.
It's like if you chose what I had to read, I don't think I would like you as a teacher. I'm just here. If somebody forces me to do something that I really don't want to do, then that just makes me dislike them.
It's what I choose, and it's what I like, and it's what I get to experience. So I get to educate myself because I like reading a lot of history books and a lot of realistic fiction books, and I get to experience what people go through and what could happen to people in real life.
Because it makes it more fun for the reader. You get to read what you want instead of reading a book that you might not like or isn't entertaining to you or doesn't really help you. Because if it doesn't help you, then what's the point of it?
It gives you a chance to if you choose an interesting book, to let your mind wander into the story, and it gives you because you show interest in the story, it makes you find further depths into it.
One of the things that I saw that really benefited my students in that year was how much I modeled reading for them. They saw me as someone who was a little more reluctant, but I really wanted to change this about myself, and I read a lot. I would read the 20 minutes that was required. If I didn't like a book, I would put it back on the shelf and I wouldn't hold on to it. I would talk to them about what I was reading and how distracting it might have been for something else to be going on. The only time I wouldn't read with them is if I was taking notes about their reading. So I would sit up at the front of the room with my book, and if I noticed a student being distracting, I would write it down in a notebook and say, Charlene was making eyes at Sergio while we were supposed to be reading. And then I would just get back to my book and model the reading. When they saw me doing that, they saw me be able to stick with a book longer. They saw me kind of struggle to stick with books that I didn't like. And they got to see what it looked like to learn to love reading, because that's exactly what I was doing, was learning to love reading.
I think because this year I've read a lot more than I did last year, and I've found out that I like other genres because typically I used to like fantasy more, but I like realistic fiction more.
Because of independent reading, I can read what I need to read. I don't have to read below or above my level, and I can grow as I need to. Autonomous.
I've seen that I'm more interested in books than I've ever been before. Cause way back, 6th, 5th, 4th grade, I never really liked to read at all.
Well, for me at least, it expanded my horizon a whole lot. So I read a lot of historical fiction this year, and I've never read historical fiction before.
Mostly with my vocab and word understanding big words, big words as words. don't understand sometimes, and it helps overall with your vocabulary and thinking.
Well, my vocabulary is really expanded, and I've also just been exposed to a lot more like genres of books and a lot more books and all that, and it's just really just opened my mind to literature in the world.
So after modeling, I say that the best thing that I did that year was talk to the kids about what they're reading. And that's something I was able to carry through even without the iRead time. I talked to the kids about their books. If it's a book that I read, because that year that we started the iRead program, I read 40 to 50 books. It was awesome. I've never felt like such a nerd in my entire life. When we finished that year, I then had a plethora of books I could recommend to kids. If I was talking to a kid about a book that I read, it was easy to say, hey, oh my gosh, have you gotten to this part? This is gonna be so good. Or it gets really dry for the next 50 pages. Here, I'm gonna put a sticky note in your book and make sure you get to this point before you drop the book. And the kids thrived off of it. Probably 60% of the time they stuck with it, and 40% of the time they're like, okay, I made it to that sticky note, Ms. Schaefer, and it is not working for me, and I wanna drop this book, and so I'd swap out another one immediately. If it's a book that I hadn't read before, I asked them why they chose it. I asked them what drew their attention to it, what had they read before that made them want to read this book. And main idea, the conversations I have about kids isn't about me manipulating them, and it's not about me, it's about them and what they're learning to read and what part of their personality comes out through the choices that they make in the book. I had to show them that I cared about them and not just that they're reading. It's not just that they have a book in their hands, but that they have something they enjoy. They have something that speaks to them. And me showing interest in why a book speaks to them and why they enjoyed it so much helped me to learn more about their personality. And we ended up with stronger relationships because of it.
Typically, when you get in a class where you're allowed to read whatever book you want, that makes the class more interesting and more fun, because then you can discuss things that you like and you can actually care about what you're talking about and what you're reading. Versus in a classroom where you're assigned reading, it's typically more stiff and boring, and I typically personally don't enjoy those kinds of classes, because then I'm forced to do work and discuss a book that I probably didn't read and I do not care about.
Classes where you get freedom to read what you want are more calm, and they feel more relaxed because a lot of people are interested in what you're reading and find it fun to read, so they're more engaged in conversation versus the kids who actually read the book and are the only ones talking. So the environments where you're forced to read certain books is more stressed out, and a lot of kids didn't read the book or didn't want to read the book and kind of zoned out and barely know the topic to begin with.
In a class where you're assigned reading, people often aren't interested in the book, and it ruins their drive to read it. Therefore, they don't understand the topic and they haven't comprehended anything from the book because they never wanted to read it in the first place. So it's really just a waste of everyone's time, because the teacher doesn't want to go over material they don't understand because they never read the book, and they don't want to read the book because it's not interesting to them.
The way that we make students literate is not as difficult as it might seem. We expose them to quality writing and infographics and video and diagrams and charts and graphs, nonfiction articles, good fiction, and we model reading and writing in the classroom. Additionally, and probably most importantly, we carve out a dedicated amount of time during the day for students to read and then reflect and then conference about their reading, and we do this in every class.
I have read 34.
22 books.
32.
24.
24 so far.
I've read 8 books overall this year.
52.
I have read 22 books this year.
About 34, 35.
I got to 20 books this year, and I'm really proud of myself because I really never read, and I started to like reading now.